I will promise you this is the only slide from the movie, just to catch your curiosity. I'm a freelance consultant based in the Rhine-Main area, and wrote a book last year about serverless computing and dealing with containers, without containers, serverless components, resources in all of my projects. So this is where this idea of this talk began. There's fuss about the name serverless. I already get asked, what is serverless and what does it mean? It's just a name. Of course there are servers, but you don't have to care about. In the end of the last year, there was a discussion on Twitter initiated by Tim Wagner, product manager, senior vice president, whatever of AWS. Serverless components based on Ben's statement, if you have a container that is active when it's not handling data, it is a server. And Tim Wagner liked this tweet. This was at 11:30 in the evening, German time, and it was an exciting night. A few hours later, 5 o'clock in the morning, next day, Adrian Cockcroft, Senior Vice President, Cloud Architecture at AWS. This company has really nice job titles. Said, if you stop paying when there's no traffic, it's serverless. That's the point. So just pay what you use. And somebody asked, so if I'm running Lambda-style functions on premise, these are not serverless by your definition, and they're not containers because just functions. And Adrian Cockcroft said, I'd call that FaaS on containers, function as a service on containers, because somebody has to pay for the idle time. And that's the point. There are many frameworks and projects coming up with dealing exactly this. You can write your function, your code, and the framework itself will package your function code into a container, and this container can be executed on a container cluster. Nice approach, good approach if you need it, if you really need it, if you want to have control over the environment. Because in the typical serverless environment, you don't have control over the environment. You just can use what your cloud provider offers to you. And if you want to have the full control over the environment, such a framework may be a good approach. Pretty well known is OpenFaaS. There's FN project. This is from now Oracle. It's former Iron.io people behind this project, and some community projects, Fission and Kubeless, all running on Kubernetes container cluster. And in the end of the day, it's this what you're getting. I had some laughs. This is, when I look out in the wild at my customers, this is regular environments. They're dealing with all this stuff they don't need. So they want to be cool. Every new project what is cool will be used. They have some virtual machines, and at any cloud provider, those virtual machines are running on bare metal, and a hypervisor in between, and then you have Mesos, DCOS, and Kubernetes. Of course, you can run Kubernetes directly on your virtual machine, but why should I do this when I can run it on DCOS, which is based on Mesos? And then in my Kubernetes cluster, I can deploy my Docker containers. In my Docker container, I have a JVM, and my own function is based on JVM code. So it's nice. I every time need use cases when I'm traveling around the world. But are my containers really stable and secure in such an environment? Because I need to know every layer. I have to have knowledge about every layer. I have to know Kubernetes. I have to know Mesos. I have to know DCOS. I have to manage all these resources. And I have to pay for this knowledge. In case of external companies doing this for me, or in terms of training my own employees, whatever. So, in most environments, they don't need all this stuff, and it works, but nobody knows why it works. So, yeah. Daniel Bryant, he's also a speaker here at the conference, made a good statement in one of in interviews of him. Containers offer great power, but they also demand operational responsibility. So you have to care about operation. You have to care about management of your containers. And this is where serverless gives you all this for free. You're just using the resources and don't need to care about your containers. And that's what the infrastructure evolution looks like. There are containers somewhere, and serverless is the next logic step. And I think in the near future, more and more container scenarios will be replaced by serverless scenarios. Not all of them, but there are certain scenarios which will be replaced by serverless. If you need the full power, you still want to run containers. If you want to have fast results, flexibility, just use serverless. And now you're yelling to me, vendor login, vendor login. I promise you, I write functions where you don't see anything of the vendor where these functions are running. At least if the functions don't use other resources of this cloud provider. But this is not the fault of the functions itself. So if I deploy an application in a Docker container, and this application makes use of resources of the cloud provider, I also use provider-based APIs. And I think it was last year when Adrian Cockcroft said here at microXchg, 2 times vendor login is still cheaper than doing it yourself in your own environment. If you want to have comparable results in your infrastructure and flexibility. Perhaps it was 2 years ago, I don't know exactly. And yeah, you can decide. If you want to have full control, then you can avoid login. You're independent. I talked to several customers who want to be independent and want to move from one cloud provider to another in case of whatever. And at the top level, it seems it's possible, but if I do more deep dive questions about how they provision their infrastructure and so on, even they recognize that moving from one cloud provider to another is still much work. It's not done by 1 or 2 days. And if you want to move fast and innovate in a fast way, and reduce the overhead you have to care about, then you should use serverless. But it's serverless, it's not cloud native, you say. Oh, come on, cloud native. Just because you're using Kubernetes, you are not cloud native. Everybody's talking about cloud native. Cloud native is the future. Cloud native is just the foundation who took over the responsibility of Kubernetes from Google and tries to spread the word for the usage of Kubernetes. But who really needs the power of Kubernetes? Not that much customers use Kubernetes. And cloud native means in terms of philosophy. It's a containerized environment, it's dynamically orchestrated, and it's microservice oriented. And all this is also possible in a serverless world. It's not bound to Kubernetes or Docker containers. And there's also a serverless working group in the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. So the Cloud Native Computing Foundation is not only Kubernetes. Serverless can also be a cloud native environment if you do it right. Help, alert. What about security? You have to care about security in both worlds. In a container world and in a serverless world. Because in the serverless world, you get the environments, the resources for free. You can use it, but you have to still care about secure usage of your resources, secure access of the resources, that there's no misuse. Also, you have to secure your containers. Because there are customers out in the wild deploying an old JBoss application server in outdated Linux Docker image with remote debugging ports open. Nice, I can remote debug in production, but I don't know if this is really that secure. I want to have my production system. Thanks, this was a quickie about serverless and containers. I hope I entertained a little bit, and yeah, think about this container and serverless thing in a new way. And if you have any questions, I'm open and I'm here today for you. Thanks.